If you learn from your failure, there's fruit in that failure. Learning is an amazing thing. And the quickest way to learn is to fail fast.
Hi, I'm Chris Godey. I don't know about you, but I know that I love to absorb content. There's so much free content out there. However, one challenge that I do have is that I often struggle to then take that content and put it into practice. I don't change the habits that I need to based off of the video that I've been inspired by. If that's you, I want you to watch this video, and then I would love for you to comment, and we would love to hear your thoughts below.
If I have a mindset of scarcity, I always think there's not enough to go around, so I'll be very selfish. If I have a mindset of abundance, I'll share and wish other people success and help other people be successful. Wow. How about failure? The mindset for failure is huge. You see, we make a mistake with failure and success. We try to separate them. That's wrong. That's a mistake. That's not reality. So we put success way over here and say you want to be successful. We put failure way over here. We say, now you don't want to fail. You want to be successful. And we play either or. I'm either successful or I fail or I fail. And they're never to be separated. Success and failure always go together. Don't miss this. Don't miss it. I've never met a successful person that didn't have a lot of failures in their life. There's no such thing as just success, 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 success. There's success, and then there's mistakes and failures and losses, and then you get back up and some more success, and it's a slow climb, but it's a climb with integrity because failure teaches us lessons that we need to learn to become successful. And success gives us confidence that when we do fail, we can change and we can learn and we can improve. And so they need to go together. They need to always be together. The mindset of, if I'm going to be successful and unique, I'm going to have some mess ups. I'm going to have some misses. It's okay. And when you have those messes or misses, they're not final. You say, okay, I didn't do well here, but I'm going to get back in the arena of action. I was having a conversation with a very, very successful person, an executive, a CEO of a major, a world-renowned company. And we were talking about his failures. And I looked at him and I said, talk to me for a moment about your mess-ups, your misses, your failures in life. Would you like to go back and have another shot at them? And would you like to do them over? Would you like to go back to a certain time when you made a bad decision and do it over? Would you like to look at something that you failed in and have another chance to do it? Would you like to go back and have some do-overs? His answer surprised me. He said, no. He said, not really. Wow. Not really? You don't want to go back at your misses and messes in life and do them over? He said, no. He said, now I've had some failures. I've had some mistakes. I've had some messes. So it's not that I've done it perfect. He said, no one does it perfect. We have success and failure. He said, I keep them together. But here's what he said that was life-changing. He said, the lessons I learned from my failures were the most important lessons I've ever learned. Those lessons changed me and made me a better person. Without those lessons, I wouldn't be the person I am today. So when you ask me, do I want to go back and do them over? I don't, because I would miss the lesson. If I missed the lesson, I wouldn't be who I am. And I don't want to do that. I'll take the failures and the losses because the lessons that have made me today who I am. So no, my character, my inner being is much greater because of what I learned from my failures and from my losses. It really wasn't that good. Yeah, you needed to see me on the front end, not the back end. So I've determined to tell people about the front end. I do. You're already seeing the back end. I just got to tell you, I wasn't that good. And the reason I want you to know that is because I committed intentionally to have a lifestyle of personally growing and develop myself on a daily basis. I achieved some pretty good stuff. But it takes time to do that. So don't be hard on yourself. Just trust me. Just trust me. It's okay. Consistency compounds, but it doesn't reward you at the end of the first week, the first month, the first year. In fact, I laugh and I tell people all the time, if you really want to quit immediately. I mean, quit like the first month because you haven't done anything yet. You haven't got anything to compound yet. But just understand, if you want to return on your failure, encourage others with your failures. And I do that all the time. I look at people, they'll tell me, I kind of messed up. I say, let me tell you about a big mess up I had. I can beat that mess up. The last thing on getting a return on failure is just understand this. The right response to your failure will give you character. So I close with this story. I was on an executive call with a CEO that is highly successful. If I gave you his name, every one of you would know him. And we're having a good call. It's an executive circle call, so I have about 50 executives on the call with me. And for 20 minutes, he's given me best practices, and then I pull leadership off of what he said, and then I ask him a couple questions. Then I open up for everybody else to ask him questions. And this guy was so good. And he talked a lot about when he was building this company, the misses and losses. I loved his authenticity. I don't think people want a perfect leader. I think they want an authentic leader. So when he finished, I asked him, I said, okay, when you look at your losses, your misses, your failures, let's talk about a do-over. If you could go back and do one of them over, which one would you pick? And I'm waiting to say, oh my gosh, if I had do-overs, there's 100 do-overs I'd like to have. I'm kind of waiting for that response. And his response just absolutely floored me. I didn't see it coming. He said, well, John, if you could give do-overs and if I could go back and do over my failures, he said, I choose not to do any of them over. I said, you have got to be kidding me. What do you mean you choose not to do any of them over? He said, well, I would leave them as they were. And he said, don't get me wrong, I made wrong decisions. I've hired sometimes poorly. I've got a lot of misses in my life, got a lot of failures, a lot of blow-ups. I got that. But I wouldn't do any of them over. And I said, why wouldn't you do them over? And he said, because every failure I had taught me a lesson. And out of that failure, I developed character. And if I went back and did them over, I would lose the lesson and I'd lose my character. And I'm not willing to lose either. So let the failures lie. I'm a better person because of it. That man knows how to get a return out of failure. And one of the questions that I ask them is very simple. How has failure shaped your life? Now, I've asked that question for 40 years every month to people bigger, better, faster, smarter than me. 100% of the time, when I ask them how failure has shaped their life, 100% of the time, regardless of the business, regardless of the experience, regardless of the age, 100% of the time, those highly successful people have said to me, I give failure the credit for helping me become successful. In other words, success in my life would not be possible if I wouldn't have had my failures. My wonderful friend Jamie Curran Lima, who just sold her cosmetic company for $1.3 billion, said to me, the way this works, John, is setbacks can become setups. She's right. She's right when we are expecting a positive return on failure. Sarah Blakely, this was interesting. She said, all my life I was taught how to deal with failure. I said, Sarah, how does that happen? She said, well, when I was going to school as kids, we would come home from school, and at the dinner table, my father every night asked us a very simple question. How did you fail today? And we would talk to him about a failure, a miss that we had. And we'd sit around that table conversation, And we as children got comfortable with failure, knowing that it would happen often. And then my father would teach us how to overcome those failures in our life. So it's so essential to get a good return on your failure. You got to keep success and failure together. Don't separate them ever again. They belong together, they work well together, and they make you the person you really want to become. That's number one. Number two, if you want to get a return on your failure, understand the difference between a good miss and a bad miss. You see, every day we have misses, but some of those misses, they're not hurtful at all. In fact, they're what I would call good misses. And then there are misses that, boy, when you have those, that'll set you back a little bit. So in helping people get a return on failure, I've done some studies on this and just some personal introspection. And let me give you what is the difference between a good miss and a bad miss. Now, there are more that I'm going to give you, but for example, if I have a good miss, it has a tendency to move me forward. Whereas if I have a bad miss, I have a tendency to move backwards. You see, a good miss is where I make adjustments. And a bad miss is where I make excuses. Now, this can be the same miss. You see, the miss isn't the issue. How we respond to the miss determines whether it's a good one or a bad one. So when I miss something, I either can make adjustments that will help me to do better, or I can make excuses, which anyone knows that the moment that you make excuses, you're in trouble. If you're not growing, pretty much you're just going to be doing what you've always done, so you get what you've always got. The second benefit of personal growth I've discovered is that it helps me just play the game better. It not only helps me get in the game, it helps me play the game better because growth increases my capacity. As I learn more, guess what? I can do more. So I have continually, intentionally developed my own growth capacity. I had a mentor when I was young, and he was teaching me how to write. And so about my, I don't know, fourth or fifth book, when I got the new book, I went out to have dinner with him, and I took him the book and signed it to him and handed it to him. I was so proud of it. And he smiled, and he said, "Well, congratulations, John, on this book." And he looked at it for a moment with just an approval look on his face. But then he asked me a very important question. He said, "John, is this your best book?" I said, "Yeah, it's my best book." And then he said words that changed my life. He said, "I'm glad," because he said, "You're only as good as your last book. Never live off of yesterday. You've got to continue to grow and learn." And that's the difference. That's the difference between best and better. Every day I do my best, but tomorrow I expect to do better. And the only way I can do better tomorrow than my best today is I'm growing. If I'm not growing, I don't have capacity for better. I hit a limit. I hit a level. And then I stay right there. And I can't stay in the game, and I can't improve my game because I've hit my limit. So personal growth takes my best today and allows me to get better tomorrow. And there's just one other benefit that I just got to jump in real quick with you. And it not only helps to keep me in the game, it helps me to play a better game, but it also helps me to help others play a better game. Because when I get better, guess what? You get better, and everybody gets better because of that process. So I want to encourage you to understand growth matters. It's one of the 5 that will empower you. It will empower you to be successful in Unique. And by the way, one of the things I love about Unique is it provides an incredible growth environment for you. And because you're in that environment, you are naturally growing. And because a growth environment is a place where other people are growing around you, and other people in Unique, they're reading good books, and they're learning, and they're teachable, and they're expanding their life. And so that's what a growth environment is. You're not the only one growing. Everybody's growing, and I love that. And that the atmosphere is affirming, and you're getting encouraged in that process, okay? This is huge. Maybe I need to tell you one quick illustration. Wow. When I was in my 20s, I heard Earl Nightingale say that if you spent 1 hour a day, every day on the same subject, in 5 years, you could become an expert on that subject. And I wanted to be an expert on leadership. So I said, I'm going to take him up on this project. I'm going to spend an hour every day on leadership. Every day. I'm going to practice leadership. I'm going to ask leadership questions. I'm going to read leadership books. I'm going to talk to leaders. Okay. I'm just every day. And Earl Nightingale said in 5 years, I could become an expert. Wow. I could be a leadership expert in 5 years. I was only in my 20s. By 30, I could be a leadership expert. Number 5, you need to encourage others with your failures. I think that leadership makes a huge mistake when they pretend that they're perfect, when they act as if every decision they made was the right decision. I learned that as a very young leader. I was very successful in my 20s, and I started literally holding success conventions by the time I was 27, 28, 29, and started attracting thousands of people. And I put on a convention, and I asked, it was a 2-day convention, and I had 4 speakers, including me. And each speaker had a half a day to help people become successful. And the first day, both of the speakers talked about their success, and they were very successful. And there was some of it was very encouraging, but by the end of the first day, I could see that the attendees were getting a little discouraged because all they heard was success, success, success. The next morning, the third speaker did the same thing, talked about all of his successes. And by noon, I realized I had a problem. There was no one admitting failure. There was no one talking about when they fell, how they got back up, how they handled that adversity. They all acted like you just make the right decisions and you just easily become successful. So I skipped lunch that day, and I pulled aside and got my legal pad out, and I said, I've got to change my teaching. And that afternoon I did. I did a lesson called Flops, Failures, and Fumbles. And I shared with them all the flops, the failures, and fumbles I'd had in business. It had an amazing impact on people because I looked at them and said, isn't it amazing all those misses and mess-ups I've had? And I'm already very highly successful. And it put wind in their sails, and it just gave them a sense of encouragement because, you see, the first 3, they presented success in such a way that the people basically said, I could never get there. That's just better than I could be and bigger than I could ever become. But then I took success and I humanized it. And I helped them understand that, yes, you want to be successful, but if you're going to be successful, it's how you handle failures. If I had a genie wish, where a genie could come out of a bottle and that genie could give me any wish that I could have. I know what my genie wish would be. I wish you could have seen me 50 years ago when I started off as a leader. The problem now, people see me today. I've written over 100 books. I've now written more leadership material than any person has ever lived in the history of the world. I'm known as the #1 leadership expert in the world, and they see all my success, success, success. If you could have seen me 50 years ago, you wouldn't have seen a lot of success. You would have seen a lot of misses and losses, a lot of mess-ups. In fact, if you could have seen me 50 years ago, trust me, you would be greatly encouraged. You wouldn't have heard somebody that can communicate on the level I can now. You had heard a person that didn't speak very well at all. You wouldn't have seen a person that would pull out another book and say, here's the answer for that leadership question. You would be talking to a person that had never written a book.
If you have the privilege of leading a team or an organization, and you would love help with enhancing your leadership culture, maybe even developing some of your high potential leaders, just follow the link on the screen, and we would love to connect with you.
Success needs failure, failure needs success, and if you separate them, they never either one reach their potential. Let me explain. For 40 years, I have had what I call learning lunches. This is just really simple. People are always asking me, John, gosh, how do you grow? Well, one of the ways I grow intentionally is literally I have learning lunches every month, and I've done it for 40 years. And a learning lunch is very simple. I take somebody to lunch, I buy it, and the only qualification of the person I take to lunch is, they're bigger than me, better than me, smarter than me, more experienced than me, more successful than me, have more money than me, whatever. In other words, they're beyond me. So I take them to lunch, and I don't even eat. I have 7 questions, and I want to ask them these questions. So I've asked these questions hundreds and hundreds of times, and one of the questions I ask is, what's the most important lesson you ever learned in your life, and why was it important to you? Well, they start sharing with me what their most important lesson was. Now, I've asked this question to hundreds of people over 40 years. And every time I ask them, what's the most important lesson you ever learned? In that lesson, as they're talking to me about what they learned, they include failure every time. I have never heard a person when they said, well, the most important lesson I ever learned, and all they talked about was wins and victories and successes. Every time they talk to me about it, they say, "Oh my goodness, no! Let me tell you." And I lost my job and I had to go another direction, or I had a friend of mine that had a serious illness, or my marriage was on the. I mean, they're always talking about some loss, some miss, some failure, and I thought, when I ask a person what's the most important lesson they ever learned, they don't take failure and success and separate them, and they say, well, let me tell you about my success. And they keep them together. And the reason they keep them together is that's where they're supposed to be. You got to keep them together. If you want to return on failure, you got to keep success close to it. Let me explain. Let's say I'm on a roll and I'm really succeeding. I'm doing really, really well. Okay, I'm hitting the ball. I need to keep failure close to these successes to keep me humble. Humility is such an important quality in a leader's life. And if I remove my failure and all I do is think about my wins, I'm going to get arrogant. And very quickly, you see, the value of humility is it makes me teachable. You show me a humble person, and I'll show you a person that sits at the feet and asks questions and say, teach me something. Humility is essential to be teachable, and teachability is essential to grow. You can't grow without being. It's impossible to personally grow without being a teachable person. So I need to keep my failures close to my successes so that when I'm on a roll, I still have a sense of humility in my life. And by the way, when I'm over there and I'm not on a roll, I'm kind of losing and I'm missing and I'm having some failures in my life, I need to keep success real close to those failures. Because when I'm failing, if I keep success close to them, it gives me resiliency. Resiliency is a result of success staying close to failure, and humility is a result of failure staying close to success. Wow. Bill Gates is exactly right when he said, success is a lousy teacher. He's right. It's a lousy teacher. He said, it makes people think they can't lose. You got to keep success and failure together. And here's why. Failure with success brings humility. We're successful and we're riding the wave and the business is doing good and we're making some money and we're getting more clients. There's kind of a high wave that we ride when we're successful. And when we fail in that success, while we're being successful, we have some misses, we have some losses. It brings into your life and my life a sense of humility that makes us a better leader. The other day I was reading a statement by Bill Gates, and it was very interesting. He said something. He said, success alone is a lousy teacher. It makes successful people think they can't lose. How often I've seen that. I've seen highly successful people who somehow think that they're on a roll and they've got that momentum and everything's going their way and they can't lose. That is not realistic. So when you're succeeding, if you keep failure with it, when you fail, it gives you a sense of humility, which what that does for us is it makes us teachable. It makes us teachable to the lessons that life wants to give us. But let me also say this. In your failure, when you have success, it gives you tenacity. It gives you resilience. It causes you and me to kind of get out of our ditch and get going again. That's why Winston Churchill would say, success is going from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. Winston Churchill knew you keep them together. But there was a problem with the question. What would you attempt if you knew that you wouldn't fail? The problem with the question, it's not true to life. There is nothing that you and I can go into with the assurance that there won't be failure in it. And so what happened is it made me strong on the front end, but it blindsided me when I got into the project because all of a sudden, even though I started it as if I wouldn't fail, guess what happened? Humanly, I failed. I had some misses. So I really learned very quickly that I couldn't go into life kind of like eliminating the possibility of failure, that I had to somehow not only include that possibility, but appreciate it. And not only appreciate it, but appreciate it to the level where I would learn from it. So how does that happen? So over time, I developed my own question about failure, and this is the one I want to give you, which will be the foundation, the platform of everything that we talk about today. And here's the question. What would you attempt to do if you knew that the failure would give you a positive return? In other words, when you go into a project in business, you know that there are going to be failures. But what would you do if you knew that when you had a failure, instead of it being a setback, a minus, a hurt, a negative, what would you attempt to do if you knew that that failure, when it was looked at correctly from the right perspective and respond to it correctly, what would you do if you realized that the failures that you have in your project today, in your business, can give you a positive return? Now, what happens is the moment you and I have this mindset, and by the way, this is realistic. What I'm about to teach you will give you a positive return in your failure. So this is not some pie in the sky. It's not Disneyland. This will work for you. The failures you have in your project, once you understand the benefits of failure and once you begin to respond correctly to it, there are so many positives to it that I will promise you, instead of becoming embarrassed by your failure, after a while, you'll begin to embrace it. And that will make you unstoppable. You see, what stops people in their business and progress is failures, setbacks, disappointments, expectations that weren't met. Those are the things that make what we're attempting to do frail, feeble, until we stop. To put unstoppable in your business, to put unstoppable in your life, you have to have a healthy respect and love for what failure can do for you. Now, when we anticipate a return on failure, in other words, I say, I'm in the project and I think there'll be some misses here, there'll be some losses, there'll be some failures. When that happens, if we expect a positive return on our failure, our whole response to failure will immediately change. It won't bother us at all to fail first. We'll jump in before anyone else jumps in because we know that whenever they jump in, there's going to be some failure. So we immediately become more initiators in our projects when we have a positive return on our failure. And we'll not only fail first, we'll fail fast. It won't bother us at all. In fact, we know that the more misses I can get out of my way, the quicker I can get to where I really want to go. And we'll fail frequently. Now, if you don't have a positive return for your failure, you're still going to fail frequently also. When I was a young leader, and Eric, he spoke about my faith. For 25 years, I was a pastor, okay? And I was a good one. In fact, when I was 28, I had the 10th largest church in America. And in fact, I, as far as I know, I'm the first person to ever put on a church growth conference. I brought hundreds of pastors together. In fact, my first conference, I think we had about 1,000 pastors. And I said, I'm going to teach you what I know about how to grow a church. And so we had this conference, and it was 2 days, and I had 4 speakers, each speaker having a half day each. So on day 1, I had 2 speakers. Day 2, I was the last speaker the last day. Well, the first speaker got up the first day, and he just talked about, and he was very good, and he talked about all of his successes. And man, we were just clapping and cheering, and it was kind of great. Wow, he's really, really good. And so that afternoon, the speaker got up, and all he talked about was his successes. And I thought, I was hoping maybe we could do a little bit better than having just success, 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 success. It's such a lousy teacher. That's what Bill Gates says. But the day was over, and people seemed to be satisfied. The next morning, now I was a young leader. I mean, I was 28? If I would have known better today, I'd have grabbed the speaker the next day and said, let me tell you what you can't talk about. You can't talk about success. We're starting to gag on it now. The next morning, the speaker got up, and he did success all day. And now I'm pissed. I'm just, oh my gosh, I'm worn out with success. So I excused myself. I went into my office, and I got my legal pad and my 4-color pen out, and I rewrote my lesson. And I said, and I walked out that last session on that day, and I said, we've had enough success. I'm gagging on it myself. And let me just say this. Anybody that ever talks about success, they have to be real. They have to be authentic. You got to talk about your misses, your failures. So I said, since you heard success from the 3 of them, I'm just going to tell you about all my failures, because I've got a bunch of them. And boy, I did a lesson called Flops, Failures, and Fumbles. And I'm telling you, I began to talk to them about all my misses and all my losses. And they're going into hysterics. They're listening to me. They're cracking up. And I just tell them, and I did this, and that was right. And they're clapping, they're cheering. And by the time it was all over, standing ovation. And I looked at them and I thought, what happened? And what happened is I realized then that if you want to impress people, talk about your success. But if you want to impact people, talk about your failures. And they identified with me, because what happens, you got to ask yourself a question. Do I want fans or friends? If you want fans, then make the gap as big as you can. And you're up here and you're amazing. And people down there, they're not so amazing, but they sure love you. And so you got fans. But the difference is, when you know that you can get something good out of a loss, what happens is it doesn't bother you to have another loss, because you know it's going to be a lesson that you learn, and you know it's going to be progress that you make. Here's what's most important. When you realize you can get a positive return out of your failure, you'll fail forward. In other words, when you fall forward. You even make progress in your fall. And so much of success is not there were no problems and there were no obstacles and everything was smooth. No, so much of success is that it was a series of failing forward. And that's what, when you get a positive return out of your failure, that's what you'll do. So, the question that we have to talk about today is very simple. How do I receive that ROF? How do I receive that return on failure? Get ready. You're about to learn some things that will positively change your life and your business. Number 1, you have to keep failure and success together. If you're going to get a positive return out of failure, you have to stop separating failure and success. Honestly, I hear this all the time. People separate failures and success, and they basically say, now go out and succeed. Hey, don't mess up, don't fail. So we got all this success over here that we're trying to get, and we're trying to push back failure and say, well, don't fail, succeed. Now we already have a problem, we've separated it. How can you separate success and failure? I've never interviewed any successful person who said, well, really, I became successful because I stopped failing. No, every person that I interview that's highly successful, they say, I succeeded in spite of my failures. They didn't say, always succeed, don't fail. They knew that wasn't possible. They knew that if they were going to really get a positive return out of the failure, they had to put them together. I have a wonderful friend. Her name is Carrie Rich. She's the CEO of Global Good Fund. And I've mentored her probably for maybe 8 or 10 years now. And she does something I find very interesting. At the end of every year, she sends out a letter to the donors of her nonprofit organization. By the way, it's a great one, Global Good Fund. They do really good work. And the year-end letter to her donors is always the same every year as far as subject. She shares with them her 3 top failures of that year. It's very interesting. And she'll say this year, and she'll talk about 3 big failures that she had in her leadership, and she'll tell the story. And so I talked to her about it. I said, Carrie, I find that an interesting year-end letter where you're very open about your failures. I said, talk to me about that. Here's what she said. She said, first of all, I want my donors, my supporters, my contributors to know that I fail, but I own my failure. I don't dismiss it. I don't act like it didn't happen. I don't blame it on someone else. And she said, I write that letter to my donors, first of all, to show them transparency and openness, that there is humanity in my leading, that I don't always make perfect decisions. She said, I send that letter to my donors, secondly, because I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the fact that they stick with me. They still support the cause, even though they know I'm not a perfect leader.
If you're like me, you watch a video like that from Maxwell Leadership and you just get inspired. I love how it's so practical. It just makes a lot of sense. But here's the challenge. We have to commit to each other. We have to commit to change, both in our personal lives and also our professional lives. Looking for more information about the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team? Follow the link below to learn more. We can't wait to hear from you and add value to your lives.